Wait a minute.
Yeah, this is
Check the fence. Yeah, that's important too. And you can use either one of these, okay? This or that. Let me just show you using this. Oh, here's the spring-loaded little balls on this thing, which keep it up against the one side of the miter slot, which is nice because then you don't have to worry about this thing having a slot like this. And in this case, you can just move your fence over until you get the fence over. Again, what you want to do is zero your, unless you want to remember what it was set on, zero it out like so.
an old DC I'm not using. I replaced it with the Incrus system, so it's just always
I highly recommend the Beesmeyer fences, by the way. This is the way you do this. You put it as far as you can in the slot without coming out of the slot forward. Set the zero, and then you slide it down. Whoa. Hey, look at that. Man.
That's the same word I use.
That's 40 thousandths of an inch right there.
You measure both sides.
Yeah. What this means is this fence is slanted away from the miter slot. All right.
I wouldn't
So-
have a problem with that.
What? 40 thousandths?
Yeah, 40 thousandths if it's going out that way. If it's going the other way, you're
Well-
pinching a blade.
Some people deliberately do that.
Yeah.
But they don't do 40 thousandths, they do 3 thousandths. All right? All right, slanted away from the blade by 3 thousandths. And why would you do that? That helps you with the kickback problem. Because once that wood is coming out of the blade, it's not actually pressed up against the fence on the outfeed side. But if you ever do that, and you take your fence and you put it over here, you got a problem. So I recommend you make it parallel as possible. So if you ever switch the fence from over there to over here for some operation, now you got the fence slanting in if you had slanted it out on this side.
And actually, back in the old days, just about everybody did that. And that was because of the flex in the fence in most craftsman's saws.
Yeah, I don't believe this. That's 40 thousandths. Now, how do you fix that? In this case, there are 4 screws here. I'd have to loosen these screws, tap that end of the fence over that way, and then until I got it where I wanted, and then tighten the screws back down. And check it again after you tighten the screws down. All right? Because it might have shifted on you while you're doing that. Okay. What else we got here? Next. Give me the next slide. This is doing it with my little block and the feeler gauge. Okay, this is on my Beesmeyer fence. That's what you're looking at here is this block. And the screw is up against the fence, but not flush, not exactly against it. It's a little gap. And now use the feeler gauge to determine what the initial gap is down here when I got it set. And then slide it down. And the next one should show you the other side. Now I know you can't read those. The first one was 20 thousandths of an inch that I was using. And once I got it down, I'm sorry, the first one was 18 thousandths of an inch, and once I got it, no, it's the other way. 20 and then 18. So my fence actually slants out by 2 thousandths of an inch away from the blade. Okay, and I was just doing that. And it doesn't matter which one you use. You generally have enough of these that, like the smaller ones are 1 thousandth of an inch difference. Then it goes to 2 thousandths of an inch.
Yeah, what you described sound like yours is 2 thousandths closer.
No, that's
out.
that's because it's out actually. I said it wrong the first time. It's closer on this end than it is on that end. Okay. So I've got a 2 thousandths of an inch slant in that fence. Next slide. No, make that go on. That's using this setup here. Okay, you just saw me do that on this one, which is severely out. okay? Same thing, start at the front, slide it to the back. And I came up with 2/1000 of an inch is exactly what I got with the feeler gauge and this. So,
Once you get it straight, you can slide that slowly and see how straight your fence face is.
oh yeah, you can also determine, you know, if the fence, if this wasn't moving off of zero, it's moving too much, so I can't tell. But you can see that thing wobble as you're going down the fence if your fence is not flat.
For a grizzly, it'll be depressing.
Excellent. Check blade angle stops for 90 and 45 degrees, okay? You can use these, all right? And I took the blade off, but let me just slap it back on there real quick. By the way, I told you not to do this if your table saw is not is unplugged, not plugged. I mean, is plugged in. I actually lay my plug up on top of the table so I can see it. Yeah, I know that's. I've already checked. Again, you would want this blade as high as possible. I'm not sure if it'll go up any more or not.
I wired in my cabinet saw when I built my shop, and you used to run to the breaker to turn it off.
Okay, and because that blade's a lot closer to this side than it is that side in the slot, I would do it like this. Yeah, okay. That's not perfect. It's close, but you can see there's a little bit of slop there. So you would need to adjust the stop. Don't know where the stop is on this. Oh, I can see one of them down there. Okay, so that's probably a 90-degree stop. It's usually a jack bolt that goes up against some hard piece of the arbor or the table. Okay, but see how that is rocking back and forth? You want to make sure you're not on a tooth, by the way. All right, because you'll be way off if you're on a tooth. Those carbide teeth stick out from the side of the blade. All right. And then you can move it to 45 and use this. It's going to slant this way. I'm not going to bother with this, and this thing is hard to move. And again, that's part of maintenance. That lead screw I can see has a lot of sawdust in it. Needs to be cleaned. And you can put this over there. Okay, and then check your 45. I think I have examples of that up there. But you can also use, if you use a square like this, you want something that's got a long enough base that's not going to do this kind of thing when you put it in there. All right, tilt over on you. All right, so I can put that up against there. Now, what you have to do in this case, oh, that's off a significant amount, is look down and see the light coming through, you know.
Usually a flashlight.
Yeah, or hold a flashlight on the back side is a good idea.
You know, when you go to set up your saw, if you've got it, they do sell a saw blade plate. There's no teeth on it, and it's perfect all the way around. If you're trying to fight that against the teeth and the different on the blade itself, all the stuff that you've checked now, if you use a plate, then you know you're good against your fence, you know you're good against all the parts, and then you put another blade
How
on
many
it.
people have a dead flat plate?
Yeah, I know.
All right, 3. All right. I should have called you.
Jim lives like a half mile from me. I would just go borrow his.
He is in.
You can also use the digital Wixley gauge. If you don't know how these things work, you put it on the table, turn it on. It's magnetic. There's a button here that says 0. You hold that button down until it reads 0. All right. Once it reads 0, you probably, I don't know how well you can see that. You take it and you put it on the side of your blade. 89.2. So this one needs to be adjusted.
Almost 2 degrees.
Yeah. But yeah, a tenth of 8 tenths of a degree.
That's right.
And I don't know how many people have these, but they're really nice.
Well, they're great.
I have one.
They're cheap.
I have one, but I discovered that my battery's dead. That's the problem with them.
I gave
There's the that's my saw, and that's using the triangle, like so. Next one. That's using the square like this. Next one. And that's using a combination square. You can use a combination square, run it all the way down to the bottom, and put it up against there. You need to be sure your combination square is square. They all aren't. Because if it's not square, you're going to be off and you'll think it's your blade and it's not. Yeah, you want to run it all the way down to the end like that, so it sits flat, and then put it up against there, like so. Next one. That's the 45-degree setting. All right, so I'll slant the blade and then just put it up against it like so. You can also take this off and use that as a 45. All right, take it off the rule off of it. Next. These are the jack bolts that determine the stop limits on my saw. All right, that's the 90-degree one. And if it was off, I'd have to either raise it slightly or lower it slightly and then recheck it. And on my saw, I couldn't get a good shot of the 45-degree stop because this is exactly on the other side on my trunnion. And there's no place I could get a camera in there to even see. I could see it through the slot here, but I couldn't take a picture of it, you know. So that's how you adjust the angle of the blade, the stops. Quite frankly, I don't depend on the stops being accurate. I will use, when my battery's working, I will use this to make sure I'm at 45. Okay. Additional items. Check for alignment of any extension tables with the primary table. All right. What that means is, I don't like this vent at all. The Beesmeyer is much nicer. You want to put it across here, and is there any gap between here and here? All right. This one's slightly below. That's not a big issue because it's very slight. I can feel it. Very slightly below. What you don't want is it slightly above. Same thing on the other side. This one again is slightly below because I feel a step down there. You might want to adjust those, and you adjust them by loosening these bolts and moving it up or down, which is a two-man job too if it's cast iron. Yeah. Let's see, check alignment of splitter with the inside edge of the blade. Use a straight edge. All right. Yeah. This is what this is talking about, but again, the problem I got with this is it's not narrow enough for me to get off of a tooth. In other words,
You want the teeth there, though, don't you?
well, really, I guess so, because you want the inside. That's true. You're right. You want the inside of the teeth to be lined up with the inside of the splitter. All right, that's what you want. Check miter gauge for looseness and in the miter slot. You know, this is my original. I don't use this anymore. I use a aftermarket one. I just got this with a saw when I bought it. Is this really 90 degrees or not? Well, I can't get this to go in the slot, but anyway, I would set it on 90, tighten it down, and use some sort of square to check and see if that's really 90 degrees with the blade. Like so. I really wish this thing would fit in that slot. I've never had a slot that was too small on a saw that I tried to check. In other words, is that... Okay, now this reading's off. It's off by, I don't know if you probably can't see that from the camera angle, but believe me, it's off quite a bit. Okay, so how do you adjust that? Well, they usually have little, they have a 90-degree stop here. Let me get it up. See this little tab here that rotates? Okay. And there's a set screw here. I would use the push this tab all the way up. It's hitting the set screw right now. I can't push it all the way up. Back off the set screw, push it all the way up. Put this right on 90 and tighten it down. I mean, make sure it's 90 degrees and then tighten it down. Okay. And you do the same thing for 45. You would loosen it up, move this thing to 45. probably the other way anyway, and use your triangle to check that.
Mention something here too. Another way to check after you think you've got it perfect, remember it's the same way as a radio alarm saw. And that
Yeah.
make a cut in a wide enough board to be able to see a difference. Use your miter gauge to make a cut, flip one side over, stand them up, and you shouldn't see anything between them. See what I'm saying?
Double the ear.
Yeah, what you're doing is doubling the air. You make a cut, you take one side and stand it straight up. The other side, you turn it up the other way and slide it together. You shouldn't see light between them.
Yeah.
Same way with a radio alarm. Anyway, and you can multiply that by 4. If you got a big enough piece of wood, cut it, turn it one directional, either clockwise or counterclockwise. Cut it 4 times that way, then you multiply it by 4. You can really see it then. Anyway, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Everybody understand that? In fact, you don't have to stand it up on its edge. You can just hold one piece like this, flip the other piece over,
Right. Yeah.
and put them up against each other and see if there's any gap.
But you need a flat edge though, so that you know that they're aligned with each other. That's where you
Yeah,
stand
you want to make sure one edge is
Right.
straight.
Yeah.
Okay, next, next slide.
Okay.
Maintenance. Keep the top and guide rail clean. This guide rail is aluminum, mine's steel. You want to make sure there's no rust on them, okay? Use steel wool and mineral spirits to clean them if you need to, clean any rust off. I've also used a random orbital sander with fine sandpaper and just going over the top before. You don't want to overdo that because you could put a divot in the top of your table, okay? And then use a paste wax. Automotive paste wax, fine. Just wax the surface and polish it.
Some of them, not all of them.
Yeah.
Some of them have silicone in them. And boy, you'll have fun when you start putting your finish on there.
Just
It-
the plain Johnson's space.
Yeah, just use
It's got
Johnson's
no
paste
edge,
wax.
no cleaners,
I'll tell you,
no-
I
Yeah.
trust it.
I use Minwax Canaba wax. Yeah.
Something that dries.
Clean trunnion gears and lubricate, okay? Like I said, I know you're not going to be able to see this, but this lead screw that tilts the blade has all kinds of sawdust in it. And you don't need a complicated tool to do that. This is fine, or a wire. You don't want to use a steel brush. You would want to use a, just so you don't scar the teeth or anything, you could use a brass brush, you know, if you wish. I find toothbrush works fine. And you can get into small nooks and crannies in here to clean stuff. And you want to lubricate it with a dry lubricant. Do not use a grease or an oil. Why? Because it will attract the sawdust and it will stick to it. And you'll be cleaning it out again soon. With dry lubricant, it tends to fall off. Yeah.
I had one of the saw manufacturers recommend to me to use just regular automotive paste wax
Oh,
as a
yeah.
lubricant.
You could wax it.
Yeah, because it's got silicone in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good idea.
Keep blade sharp. I'll check belt condition and tension periodically. Yeah, belt condition. Are there any cracks in that belt? If there are, you need to replace it. Or is it, yeah, and check the tension periodically, just to make sure that everything's okay, you know. Keep blade sharp and clean. I don't know if you can you get a close-up of that blade? Do not use a blade like that. Yeah.
Do you recommend getting the blades resharpened or just replacing them?
No, if it's an expensive blade, you by all means get it
Is there a
resharpened.
place you can have?
When you're checking your blade, the things you want to look at is any pitch buildup on the edge of this blade. This has got a lot. You don't want this much to ever accumulate on your blade. You can get a cleaner. A bunch of the woodworking places sell a commercial cleaner.
Simple green works too.
Yeah, and you want to be careful with some cleaners, like some people use oven cleaners. They can be pretty caustic, as long as you don't leave your blade sitting in there a long time. You know, but because you want to get this stuff off, and you'll first notice the buildup by you'll start getting burn marks on your, particularly if you're ripping a long piece. and you hesitate even slightly, you'll get a burn mark. Often that's due to the pitch buildup on the side of the blade. Some woods burn anyway, like cherry.
I found out that the lid off of a 5-gallon bucket, the top of it has just enough depth in it to put the blade in.
Yeah, you typically want to lay this down in some sort of container and pour the solution over it and let it sit. Okay, and then take a brush, and I use a brass brush and clean it. Yeah, I don't use my toothbrush, I use a brass brush. It's a little stiffer.
Sell it here?
What? Yeah. Yeah. The other thing you want to do is, even if it takes a magnifying glass for some of you, look at the edge of your teeth very carefully. Do they appear to be rounded or chipped? If they are, then that's definitely a sharpening deal. Whether you choose to get these things sharpened is a function of how much that blade cost you and whether you really want to replace it or not. If it's a $100 blade, it's well worth getting sharpened. I've had a tooth come off of one before. I don't know where it went, but thank God it didn't come at me. And I had to have a new tooth put on it, and they'll typically do that too. So, some of us, and I fall in that category, tend to get a little lazy about this, but it will greatly improve your cuts if you keep that blade clean and sharp. Next. That's just showing my tabletop. I clean it periodically and I wax it. Yeah, even the outfeed table. You might not think about that. That's mellow and mean, but I'll wax it. You know, just so it slides easily.
Does that ball bearing rail work pretty good for you, Gerry?
Yeah, for sheet goods. He's talking about the rail on the right-hand side with the ball bearings on it. But after I moved the saw and put it back together, I found out that those bearings are higher than the table, so I've got to.
Would you find small pieces make it rough when they're going over it if it's a long, narrow piece or something?
Not really, because those bearings at the front are pretty close together. Matter of fact, there's almost no space between them. They're almost butted up against one another. At the beginning and at the end, they're further apart. That's something I need to adjust on my saw. Again, if you take your level and you put it out there, I can see that those bearing tops are higher than my table is. That shouldn't be. So I haven't used it recently. In fact, I just recently put it back on. If cuts are not smooth or even and produces burning, then check the blade for pitch buildup, clean it, and try a new cut. Condition of the blade teeth, examine them visually like I talked about, or even replace it with a different blade and see if it's smoother and doesn't burn. Again, check arbor or blade wobble using tune-up procedures. Okay, that would only be if you're not getting a smooth cut as you're going through, and you can actually see the tooth marks on the cut. You would, in fact, this glue line rip on my saw, when it comes off, I can rip two pieces, put them right together and glue them. Don't have to flatten them or anything. And I can tell when that blade's starting to get dull. Anything else there?
Do you wind up changing your blade a lot by going from a rip blade to a combination of a cross-cut blade? I mean,
Yeah, I don't, and there's a reason for that. I have a radial arm saw. I do all my cross-cutting on the radial arm saw. I don't do cross-cutting on the table saw.
okay.
I do ripping on the table saw and cross-cutting on my radial arm saw. Not all of us have that luxury, so I hardly ever pick this thing up.
Anything else off the food?
No.
I wanted to add a couple of things.
I was going to talk a little bit about safety. Let's just briefly go over some safety things. I know Bob did this extensive safety thing, but just some things that you might not think about, and some of these are common sense. Don't wear gloves or loose clothing around any rotating piece of equipment, by the way. Anybody who walks in a shop with a tie on is nuts. Even a chain. You don't want anything hanging from your neck. All right? I don't care what it is. I don't even wear rings or a watch. And I got that from working on automobiles and having to stick my hand down there while the engine's running. You don't want anything on your body that can get caught in something that's turning. Okay. The other thing is wear proper eye and hearing protection. That should be obvious. I know some of us don't do that. Staying comfortably, you want your feet far enough that you got good balance. You also want to be standing to one side of that blade. Why? Because if you get kicked back, hopefully it goes this way. However, I've had a small piece before, and you shouldn't be cutting small pieces unless you're got your proper setup for it. Like you put a stop block here on your fence so that once it hit the blade, it came off that stop block. Now it's not trapped between the blade and the fence, but I had that happen to me once. And it was a small piece, and the blade caught it. Not only did it come up like that, but it spun it this way, hit me right here. And I'm standing over here. You know, hit me right in the gut. Fortunately, I'm going, no, there's no blood. How many people have had a kickback and been hit by a piece of wood? It is painful. I guess I don't have to tell you.
Has anybody cut themselves on this?
Yeah, the other thing, and the other thing is keep your hands, the general rule is at least 6 inches away from that blade. Use a push stick if you have to, or well, here's a couple of different styles. By the way, that's a saw blade handle. That profile is a saw blade handle. All right. This one happens to have a little, and I did not make this one. I inherited it with my saw. A little dowel that comes down and hooks a piece of wood. And the nice thing about this is it's relatively narrow, so I can actually push it through on a relatively narrow cut. You can get just a piece of plywood and make something like this.
Prettiest one of all.
Yeah, you really beat that one up, didn't you? These are commercially available. Also, you can use thin plywood, apple ply. I've got a couple of push sticks. I couldn't find them last night that are apple ply, and they're about that thick. And the thing about it is I can get really close to the blade, but once I pass over the blade, my hand's not close to that blade. This one's just a different style, and I didn't make this one either. It's got the same style handle, but it's just got a little bit of it's got an adjustable piece down here to catch the backside of that piece of wood. The nice thing about this is you can get a lot of downward pressure. And why would you want downward pressure? Because the blade's coming up this way when it's spinning, and you won't be able to get some pressure on that piece of wood on the back side, because that's what causes that thing to come up. And it'll lift that piece of wood if you haven't got any pressure back there. Matter of fact, you can hear it. I've actually experienced that, to hear that. That's that blade picking that piece of wood up and slapping it down. You only hear it on thin wood, like 1/8 inch plywood or something, but you'll hear it if you don't have some pressure on the back. Let's see, what else? Push stick, stop block if you want to cut short length, cross cut short lengths. Okay, what you do is attach a block to the side here. I don't have one. Roughly right about here that sticks out, and that's going to be your stop block for the length that you want to cut. But the thing about it, the stop block should not go past the front of that edge of that blade, because you want it to actually come off when it's cutting and have a gap between your fence and the blade. Fence and your stop. Never reach behind or over a blade. How many people have done that? Reach over here while that blade's still turning and move a piece. You don't really want to do that. For 2 reasons. One is it's too easy for you to get your hand against that blade. Yeah, Ralph?
Can I show you something
Yeah.
real quick? And this is Bob brought in his physical therapist one time when he had surgery. And I was really surprised about this, but it's just what Gerry just said. By far the worst injury that they see, the orthopedic guys see, is not just your fingers, it's your arm. Just like Gerry just said, you reach across, if you're wearing a jacket, if you're working in cold, or even a long sleeve, you catch, the saw blade catches your sleeve and pulls your arm down into it. And it's by far the worst accident, and it happens more often than we realize.
Yeah.
And I just want to point that out because Bob brought that guy in one day, and I was really surprised about that.
Yeah,
Just day before yesterday, I was at my own doctor, and we were talking about table saws and woodworking, and he told me, he says, it's surprising how many people he sees that are missing parts of their fingers from table saws.
I saw hands. Anybody ever cut themselves on a table saw? Yeah, how did you?
It was 20 years ago. I had no craftsman saw, using a push stick, piece of oak, doing everything right. Somehow the blade caught the oak, pulled my thumb into it, and I have a third of my thumb.
Yeah.
They didn't have solid stops back then.
One thing that you might think about too, and people don't, I know that people get lazy, but I had actually had this happen. I don't know where the zero clearance plate is, but I had a friend who was cutting wood and he didn't have the blade that high. Left the saw running, walked over here, did something, came back, put his hand right on the blade. And it cut right between these two fingers. Didn't get any bone, cut the ligaments between these two fingers, so he had to go through a lot of therapy before he got full movement. But he was lucky, because it cut right between those two fingers.
What do you think of grip handle pushers? Think you hold your hands?
People like them. I don't have one. You'd have to talk to somebody who has one. The gripper?
I like it a lot.
Where do we can go?
Yeah, Ralph?
We talked about Sherman, showing Sherman's old things. One thing Sherman did not too long ago, just a couple of years ago, before he passed away, is he had kickback, and a piece came back and hit him in the forehead, and it disoriented him, and then when that happened, he put his hand in the blade all at the same time.
Wow.
Because that kickback was so hard, and I think he was trying to reach to turn off the saw or something, and actually put his hand right in the blade.
Yeah, I didn't mention this. You don't want to really cut like this, thin piece like that. I've had kickback. It didn't hit me, but it went stuck in the wall behind me. Okay, if I've been standing here, it would have hit me. God knows how far it would have gone, but it stuck through the drywall behind me. I had to go walk over there and pull it out. You know, you really, if you want to cut thin pieces, put the blade over here and have the thin piece come off on this side. Okay?
Can I throw one more out there before you leave that?
Yeah.
This just happened to me not long ago. And it's funny, because he did a thing with two push sticks the other day. And I don't use two push sticks, but I'm going to show you what happened to me just like 3 days ago. So I'm cutting a piece of wood. God, that is kind of sucky. I'm cutting a piece of wood like this, and I'm pushing it through, and I'm pushing with this hand to keep the wood against the fence. Well, it's actually wider, it's out here, so I'm pushing with this hand to keep it against the fence. This hand slipped off, went right straight across. If that blade had been 1/4 of an inch higher, I'd have got all of it. So, yeah. So you're right.
Yeah.
You're right. But it's hard for me because I do a lot of wider stuff. It's hard to stick it way out there, but I got to figure out somewhere. But I've gotten out of the habits of using my, I'll get into that
Why
later.
don't you use your fingers there?
Huh?
Your mechanical fingers you have in your drawing.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. I'm going to get to that. I don't want to.
Okay. The only other thing that I'll mention is make sure this thing's locked down. I've had that happen to me before. I didn't have it all the way down.
Yeah.
You start cutting and the fence goes that way on you. You know, you don't want that. Never, ever cut without the miter gauge or the fence. And I've seen people do that. Push a piece of wood through like that. And it was a contractor and he was working on my house and I went, "You have insurance?" Actually, I'd asked him before, so I knew he had insurance. But I went, "Do you do that all the time?" He says, "Yeah." He was putting in flooring was what he was doing, you know. Laminate flooring. He was at a saw like that and he's going, just pushing it through, you know. You will definitely get yourself in trouble that way. Sooner or later. You might be able to get away with it a few times. Okay, that's basically it for my presentation. We do have some jigs for table saws we were going to go over.
I'll go as far as I can. You feel free to throw in.
Okay.
This is what I had gotten used to using a long time. And these actually are attached to the top of your fence. Works even with a B-smile style fence because it holds it good enough, even though it wants to flex up at the back end. But I gotten away from this because, and I like these are called board buddies. Yeah, and what they do is the wheels will go one direction where it won't go the other direction to keep it from kicking back. And they also, the way they're designed, it keeps your board against your fence. So I didn't have trouble with that. As long as I fed it through the board buddies, it would keep it to the fence on the back side, so I didn't have to push it. But I'll show you why I don't use these as much.
By the way, there's yellow ones and there's orange ones. The orange
Yeah.
ones are for radial arm saws.
Yeah.
Ripping on a radial arm saw, which you can do.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah. You can be done safely, but
But I added a feeder, but we'll get to that in a minute. But this week, I've never had the need for this, but this week I've got to make a lot of trim for a big island and a big bar that's with a kitchen that I'm trying to finish up. And I need to cut a rabbet on the back side of the trim. So I finally needed this. And I was looking online for research on another project and ran across this Norm Abrams design. So we know it's right. Anyway, I thought it was pretty cool. I put it together last night. It only took about 30 minutes to put it together. Some old leftover scraps. All it does, my fence, of course, is wider. It's a beast fence. It straddles the fence, and when you're cutting a dado, you have a sacrificial fence on the outside. Well, that sacrificial gets chewed up all the time. So I wanted to be able to put it, this is the real fence. That's the sacrificial fence, okay? So when you go to cut, sorry Dan, you want to be able to cut your dado up into the board to get the perfect width that goes full width of the rabbet, okay? And the neat thing that Norm did is he put these little screws in the back. I didn't have any T-nuts, so I just threaded the wood. It seems to be holding okay for right now. But and that just goes against the fence to keep it down, keep it from rising up. And I needed these, and he put those toggle clamps, but I didn't have any. But I had these. So I just rigged these up, and you just lay it over your fence, move your fence over to your dado, raise your dado up, or tighten it up against the fence, raise your dado up so that it cuts into the sacrificial, and you can adjust for the width for that. But these are, they sell them here, they're cheap, and I got a bunch of these, they're handy. You don't have to have anything fancy, they're just brake screws to the fence to work the depth that I got to use. Anyway, I thought, I just happened to be making it this week, and I thought, well, I'll bring that in. Pretty